Understanding Mother Stories podcast with Adeline Dubreuil. Your 10 minutes to talk about mothering and matrescence. Hello, Mama. Welcome to Understanding Mothers podcast. And today I'm super excited because I have an amazing guest, and this is Taylor Chinenere. She's a lactation consultant here in HRM, and I think part of south of the province as well. And today she's going to answer some of our many questions that we have about breastfeeding. Just to tell us short mother stories, my own story with breastfeeding is quite complex, and this is something I've had to heal in the past, and I still talk about it, but in a way more free way. I have healed from all the frustration, the hurt, the harm, and everything I've been through with my first labor, which was quite complicated. It has not panned out the way I wanted. I didn't get the right support. I didn't know about lactation consultant, and nobody told me about, not even my midwives. So I didn't get the actual support I would have needed that now I know new moms can have. And I find it amazing. And as a very soon-to-be postpartum doula, this is definitely something that I'm going to try to bring to my clients, because I think this is the most amazing support you can have, because my feeling is that everybody can actually have a positive breastfeeding journey, but it doesn't always pan out this way because we do lack the right information and the right people around us. So welcome, Taylor. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here chatting with everybody. And wow, do I ever just want to hold your story and the stories of so many other mothers who have experienced breastfeeding challenges with so much compassion, because as a board certified lactation consultant, that is why I'm here doing this work. You know, breastfeeding is one of these things that is said to be natural, but that doesn't mean that it comes naturally to us, especially in this culture and in the society that we have that places so many barriers. So, you know, I see everybody from those who just need a little bit of support and encouragement to some of the most complex cases that I could possibly see in my work. And to anybody who is navigating breastfeeding challenges, I just want to see you and hold your story with compassion and understanding, because we need good support. It doesn't come easily for everybody.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. Because even I find that the day that I have met you through other systems and, following all the work you've been doing on Instagram, I was like, oh my God, I so wish I would have known her 8 years ago when I had my daughter. But I was in British Columbia at the time, so that wouldn't have been possible. But, someone like you, or even know about IBC, that's what we call IBCLC, International Board.
IBCLC, International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. Yes.
There you go. I wish I would have met someone like this who could have supported me. So let's dive into a whole bunch of questions. So all the questions I'm going to ask today, I have gathered them from my own experience, and what I have felt for so long was a failure from my part. And now I know it was not a failure, but, it takes a long time sometimes to get there, but also from many questions that I see out there through clients, other mothers, friends of mine, and everything we see on accounts for lactation, and people who just have had issues, issues, I'd say more challenges. I prefer the word challenges, like you said. Yeah. So my first question would be, actually from a mother I know who was always wondering what were the best positions for breastfeeding.
Ooh, this is such a good one to start with. And maybe before I start, I'll also just acknowledge that when you say, oh, I wish I had seen a lactation consultant 8 years ago, when I am doing a home visit with somebody, oftentimes I see the mother-in-law or their own mother there supporting the moms I'm seeing. And I'll hear that all the time, this, oh, I wish I'd had you when I had my babies years and years ago. And another thing that we often see out there is just this general misunderstanding of what is normal. We don't have a lot of examples in our cultures and in our communities. We don't. Many of us might not know anyone who has breastfed before, or the stories that we have heard had a lot of challenges involved. So it's what can be really empowering is just knowing what's normal and having these kind of basics under your belt. I won't say that it will completely prevent every challenge, but it can be so helpful. So starting with what are the best positions for breastfeeding, really whatever feels good for your body. But I will go into more detail because that's so vague and unhelpful. So what I will say is that probably the positions for breastfeeding that are not going to be as helpful are the ones that you see on the pretty breastfeeding posters of the mother with the perfectly perky breasts that stick straight forward with the baby who's way up here. That might not be a position that works for everybody because everybody is different. And I mentioned images that you see online or like the pretty breastfeeding posters and books because those particular images often feature like a really high up, lots of pillows, cross cradle position where you need a lot of physical support. And that particular position is actually associated with a lot of nipple pain because it just doesn't work for all bodies. The fact that in our culture and just historically, formula feeding had become the norm for a number of generations, and bottle feeding has become very culturally normal. And not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but the way that we hold a baby to bottle feed and that image in our minds actually influences how we tend to hold our babies. And
Oh, wow.
when we're aware of that, we often realize that, okay, maybe we're holding our babies a little too high up, and we need to actually work with first, where do your nipples naturally point? Do your nipples go down? Are your breasts down here? Bring your baby to your breast instead of trying to lift everything up like that pretty magazine image. And I'll give you a few more like very practical tips for breastfeeding positions. If your baby is well supported posturally, then they are going to feed better. So what does that mean? It would mean that their ears and shoulders and their hip are in a straight line. And there's some space between your baby's chin and your chest. So if you find that hard to visualize, here's a tip that I can share with you. If you were to take a glass of water and take a drink, but you tuck your chin way down to your chest, and then you try to take that glass of water, it's really hard to swallow. What we typically do is we tilt our head back and there's space between our chin and our chest so that we can comfortably swallow that drink of water, right? Infants need the same thing. If their chin is really tucked down to their chest, it's going to be really uncomfortable and challenging for them to swallow. Using the
Wow.
same, using the same analogy, if you're thinking of taking that glass of water, if you tilt your head all the way over towards your right or left shoulder and your body is facing forward, and then you do the same thing, you try to take a drink, it's going to feel kind of uncomfortable on your neck. So if your baby is laying down on their back and they're trying to turn their head towards your breast in order to take a drink of your milk, it's going to be less stable and less comfortable for them to get a deep and effective latch. So a breastfeeding position where often I like the phrase tummy to mummy so that their belly is right against your skin. They're well supported. Their legs aren't hanging off the edge of the earth, kind of flailing everywhere. They're right against your body. They're posturally stable and secure, and they're far enough down so that they have to kind of extend their neck a little bit in order to take a nice mouthful of your breast tissue. Though that position is going to be helpful. And those tips can work for football position. It can work for kind of a cross cradle position. It can work for any position that you are breastfeeding your baby in. As long as you kind of follow those little steps, it will help you get closer to a more comfortable and effective latch. So many positions to
Wow.
breastfeed in, but kind of thinking of those little pieces will help bring it together in a comfortable way.
But I feel that what you described is something I've never heard before. Because when we hear about
Hmm.
positions, we think about the cradle and then there's the side lying and things like that. But I like that what you give is actually more important than anything else because the side lying or the cradle or something is going to be more about the mom's comfort and how she
Yes.
feels, right? And how baby maybe latches the best.
Ah,
But
yeah.
what you gave is just something so much more helpful than just being like, oh, let's try on the side, let's try on the back or whatever.
Yeah, and because every body is going to be different, right? For the mom whose breasts like point downwards, um, it might be more comfortable to do a koala hold or a football hold. But if tummy is against mummy and they have that extension between their chin and their chest, and they can get that nice big mouthful of breast tissue, it doesn't matter where your baby's at. You can really kind of respond to your baby and your own anatomy. Something that's really common is the advice that's out there really kind of tends to focus on how wide baby's mouth is and the position of the nipple. Like we're kind of zooming in almost to like, okay, what's the mouth and the nipple doing? And you'll hear advice such as, oh, point your nipple towards your baby's nose or nose to nipple. Sometimes though we forget that feeding is actually like it's a full body experience for your infant. And so when we kind of zoom out and look at the whole body's position, tummy to mummy, that alignment of ear, shoulder, and hip, and then bringing your baby down so that they have that nice extension between their chin and their chest, we're zooming out a little bit and it gives us a fuller picture of what's happening because we are so much more than just a wide mouth and a nipple. Like it's there's more going on.
That's amazing. And hearing you, I'm just like, the people who talked to me when I was trying to breastfeed had no idea what they were talking about.
Right. And I think many of our health providers really intend well. And just
Yeah,
hearing some things in a different wording or different language just makes it click for some people.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So our next question was, how often should I feed my newborn? So we're talking really like just after birth and probably the first few weeks. Is there schedules? We talk about on-demand feeding. So what's the deal about all that?
Oh, right. And like, what does on-demand feeding even mean? And what does a schedule even mean? So, the official advice that you'll probably hear is feed your baby every 3 hours. But that gets misinterpreted, or feed your baby at least 8 times in 24 hours. That's another way that it sometimes gets phrased. And for a moment, I'll just kind of talk about why that guideline is out there. And then I'll give you the answer to the question.
Okay.
so, um, hospitals and public health systems really like to have clear guidelines that are based on research that they can kind of tell their patients. Our Western medical system isn't always quite as comfortable with, oh, well, it could be different for every baby, and to kind of give that highly individualized advice. So there is some research on how often do breastfed babies feed. And it might not be a surprise that it's highly variable based on the baby, based on how much milk an individual mother's breasts can physically hold and produce at any given period of time. And what has actually been found is that somewhere between 6 and 16 times a day is within the range of normal.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
However,
that's a
so
big range.
it's a very big range. And so our healthcare system kind of took the average, like took all the numbers, decided what's the average of all those numbers. They go, okay, 8 is the number. Feed your baby every 3 hours. But
Okay.
that just, our babies don't know how to tell time. They don't know how to read a clock. And babies aren't machines that all follow a predictable 3 hour schedule. So, how often should you feed your newborn baby? Pretty much whenever they open their mouth. Like, think all the time. So, I would say 8 times or every 3 hours is what I would consider a minimum. So
Hmm.
I like to look at your baby and what I call breast cues. So breast cues are things like your baby sticking out their tongue, smacking their lips, even turning their head side to side or stirring from their sleep, putting their hands towards their mouth. It's almost like any behavior of a newborn could be interpreted as a breast cue. And really, it's because boob is the answer to everything when you have a newborn. And this is really important because if we take the 8 times in 24 hours, every 3 hours advice, and we take that to heart and we only feed our babies every 3 hours, we actually run the risk of not providing enough opportunity for our babies to practice breastfeeding, because as I said, it's natural, but it doesn't come naturally. It's a skill that we build. And it also runs the risk of not having adequate milk removal and stimulation of the breasts. So
Okay.
I would say 8 times, offering the breast 8 times in 24 hours, or approximately every 3 hours, is like a minimum. But it's also normal if your baby is constantly like stirring and cueing and willing to latch on, that's okay as well. And I like to call those cues breast cues, not hunger cues, because if we have a little sneaky, like a little snacky baby who always wants to go to the breast, and we've just fed them and then we take them off and they're cueing again, we might go, oh my goodness, do I have enough milk? My baby is still showing hunger cues, which is actually totally normal because babies they don't just feed for physical nourishment. They also feed for comfort, for nervous system regulation, for connection and attachment. But if we think of it as only a hunger cue, it can plant that seed of doubt of, oh my goodness, do I have enough milk? My baby still wants the breast, when it's just completely normal. And it's a way for your baby to tell your body, this is how we produce more milk. And this is how we tell our body to release those hormones to do that. So minimum 8 times, but pretty much any time. Boob is the answer.
I love that. I feel like it just makes so much sense. It seems like it should be common sense, but we are fed so many different information, including coming from babies who have formula, which is absolutely not the same. And I feel like the on-demand thing is now a lot more clear. Thank you.
Yes. And, this idea of scheduling our infants was very, very pervasive during the Industrial Revolution and the intensive mothering and scientific motherhood movement. The idea of having your baby on a strict schedule was very, very common in medicine up until just recent generations. So that idea still kind of comes forward with us. The legacy still persists. But I just love to tell people, like, boob is the answer to all of your problems always. Latch that baby.
Yay!
Yes.
Take those boobs out.
Yep.
So a very common question is how or can I increase my milk supply? Because I didn't end up breastfeeding through the breast, but I've pumped for both my children. And there was a lot about like lactation cookies and special oils or special thing that we should take. I mean, personally, I love the lactation cookies just because they are carbs. And I think we just need carbs to be able to have some milk. Water and carbs were just my way to go. But what's the deal with how can we make sure we have a proper amount of a proper milk supply?
Oh, yes. The lactation cookies are always a big thing. And there's so many supplements and there's so many teas, and influencers on social media will always have something to sell you related to your milk supply. And when it comes to establishing an abundant milk supply for you and your baby, or increasing your milk supply if you have concerns about how much milk you're making, the number one golden rules here are frequent enough and effective enough milk removal. So here's what we need in order for our bodies to produce milk. And supply is kind of one of those things that I'm careful with language, because supply implies that we have this finite supply that can run out. But the reality is that our breasts are organs that continually produce milk. There's ongoing milk production if we tell it to do so. And to support that, we need frequent enough milk removal, effective enough milk removal. We also need good hormonal health as well, and calories and things like that. So, frequent enough milk removal would be looking at that kind of minimum, every 3 hours or so. And there will be some variation from one baby to another. If your baby sleeps 4 hours, don't panic. But feeding your baby on demand based on their cues around the clock, 24 hours a day, that's a pretty good way to encourage that milk production. Something else that we want to be aware of, though, is effective milk removal. And so here we want to make sure that milk is being removed effectively and completely from the breast. I mean, you can never completely empty the breast because it's always continually producing milk, but we'll just say that for now. So some ways that breast milk can be ineffectively removed would be, maybe your baby has a very shallow latch. So if you're having nipple pain or pinching or any discomfort with latching your baby, it could imply that that latch might not be super deep or effective. Your baby's going to feed a lot more effectively when we've got a good functional latch. There could be other issues that play into this, though. So babies who are born premature or before 37 weeks could potentially have less stamina and a robustness to effectively remove that milk. So they might need some additional support. There could be things like tongue ties or neurological conditions or cranial nerve dysfunction that cause a baby to be a bit disorganized. So there's potential. There are other potential causes of ineffective milk removal. Something else that I'll point out as well is when it comes to pumping, these same principles apply. We want, if you're pumping because your infant has some challenges that prevent them from fully effectively removing milk from your breast, or if you're an exclusive pumper or anywhere in between, then we want to make sure that your pump is well fitted and appropriate to your needs and your body. So we need a pump that's strong enough for your needs. And we also need to make sure that your flange is fitted properly to your nipple. I will kind of digress for a moment and say that when it comes to pump flange sizing, the standard that comes with your pump might be a 24 millimeter or a 27 millimeter, the part that actually touches your breast and nipples. But one of the first guys who patented breast pumps was actually a dairy engineer, and that standard sizing comes from the dairy industry, which you might hate to hear or think is hilarious.
I think it's funny.
Human beings are not cows, and most people need smaller than a 24 millimeter flange. So frequent and effective milk removal, whether you're using your baby or using a pump, are the main ingredients for making sure that you can bring in an abundant milk supply or increase your supply. Now, I did mention that things like, good hormonal signaling are also part of that piece. But before you jump to supplements and lactation cookies or teas or herbs, anything along those lines, which to some degree can absolutely increase levels of prolactin or support blood sugar regulation or other things that could impair that hormonal signaling, it's not the first ingredient that I would adjust. And there's no amount of supplement or herb or tincture or tea or cookie that you can have that's going to work without also combining it with that frequent and effective milk removal. So in a nutshell, I do totally use herbs and nutrition and things like that to support people, but it's always very individual what's going to work. That depends on your situation. Don't waste money on the tea and the tincture before you talk to a lactation consultant. Look at the frequent and effectiveness of your milk removal first.
That's a good advice. And for the little story, I remember someone telling me that I should use fenugreek, and I did, and it actually lowered my milk supply. I didn't notice it right away, but I've learned since then in my doula training that this is a possibility. And now I'm like, oh, that's what happened.
And fenugreek is one of those ones where, it's a herbal supplement that is traditionally used in milk supply, postpartum care and nutrition. However, when it comes to herbal supplements, again, the primary reason that someone has low milk supply is not going to be the same for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So herbs, just like medications, for example, not every herb is going to be appropriate for every single person. And fenugreek is a great example of that. So if you're going to consider herbs and supplements, you should definitely do so in consultation with an IBCLC who can give you very tailored advice.
Seems like the best idea. Okay, so what are some signs that my baby is getting enough milk?
Oh, this is such a great one. So, some very objective signs would be your baby is having lots of wet and dirty diapers. So if it's coming out, it had to have gone in. That's kind of the philosophy there. So by the time your baby is around 4 to 5 days old, we'd probably like to see between 4 and 6 dirty diapers per day and like at least 6 heavy wet diapers. Now, another piece of this will be that they are gaining weight. So gaining weight is this will be something that is obviously checked if you go to your midwife or doctor's appointments. But if you are at home and you don't have the ability to weigh your baby or compare growth chart notes, other signs that your baby is getting enough milk would be that you hear lots of swallowing when your baby is at the breast, right? That your baby is alert, they have a strong cry, that they rouse on their own for feeds. Does your baby feel calm after they have fed? Do they get that, limp noodle arm, milk drunk face? So even just kind of observing your baby's temperament and your baby's overall demeanor, that can also give you information. If you find that you're hearing your baby swallow for a couple of minutes and then they really slow down or they start to fall asleep, you could switch them to the other breast as well. And that often leads to another letdown or there's lots of abundant milk available on that second breast. So it can give them like an extra boost. So those are some ways that you can tell that your baby's getting lots of milk. Observe them, be aware of diaper output. Of course, growth is going to tell us a lot as well, but just look at your baby. That will also help you.
Oh, that's so cool. I remember my mom telling me that in the 80s when I was born, they would weigh us before a feed and after to know how much we had actually.
I totally use that as a tool sometimes. And I wouldn't say that we always do that because your milk volume is going to change. You're naturally going to have less milk in the evenings, which is why babies cluster feed. So they feed more frequently. And then we tend to have the most milk through the night and into the early morning. So if we did a weight like before and after one feed, it's not going to give us a picture of the full day. But it does give us some information.
That's cool. So a very personal question. It comes from me. How do we handle sore or cracked nipples? Because that was a big problem for me and that stopped me from breastfeeding because I was in too much pain. Everybody was telling me that my baby was latching perfectly. So basically it was my fault if I was bleeding and if I was, I was not able to take that pain. So how could we help women that would go through that?
Oh, yes. And you know what? This is so common. I will say that while nipple pain is incredibly common, it is not normal. And so just first of all, knowing that it's not something that you're supposed to go through when you breastfeed. I know so many mothers who just like white knuckle through pain because they think it's just a part of breastfeeding. One, just know that, okay, if you are bleeding, if you have cracks in your nipples, if you have extreme shooting pain, that it is never normal. And so there are functional things that we can do to help. So first of all, the main culprit is like a shallow latch. So of course, doing things like making sure that all of those positioning pieces are lined up, that your baby's mouth is open wide, that you're not pushing on the back of your baby's head and tilting their chin down to their chest as you bring them in when you're trying to get a good latch. Those are good starting places to try to get more of your breast tissue into your baby's mouth. So that's a starting point. But some people still have nipple pain due to other issues such as tension from birth causing your baby baby to have a tight jaw or not opening wide enough, or tongue ties and things like that. So, call that IBCLC, call your lactation consultant, or go to your local leche league group to get some help from other experienced people to fix that. Now, if you have like damaged nipples that you want immediate relief for, some things that I tend to reach for if there's cracks in the nipple, I like to use Medihoney, which it's a medical grade wound care gel. It's not the same as just Manuka honey that you would buy at the grocery store, because we know that for infants under 12 months, honey is not recommended.
No honey for babies.
Medihoney has been irradiated to kill any botulism spores, so it's perfectly safe to use on wounds. And I would use a little bit of that. In addition to keeping the wound covered and actually moist. So I don't mean sitting in a pool of milk, but you could use a hydrogel dressing, or you could also cover the nipple in a little bit of olive oil or coconut oil just to keep the nipple moist. You don't want it to dry out, because that often kind of leads to cracks, like reopening, and that feels really yucky.
And so that makes sense.
Moist wound healing tends to be our go-to. And that's kind of the basic. I will say that sometimes there are allergic reactions to topical treatments for nipples. Like lanolin is actually very common, but a lot of people tend to be allergic to it. I tend to recommend like oils or butters over lanolin. Your own breast milk can also be healing. And so those things can kind of get you through a crisis until you have the support from the lactation consultant or the peer support to get you through from the nipple pain. It's the most common
lactation
reason,
consultant.
Right? It's the most common reason that people quit breastfeeding, but it's not something you have to suffer through.
Oh, that's good. That's so healing for me to even hear it.
Yeah.
How can I involve my partner in the breastfeeding process? Because I know that for some couple, this is a tension challenge.
Yeah. Yes. I think knowing that for partners, one of the most important things that you can do for your baby is to actually nurture that mother-baby bond. And so sometimes we think, dads can't create a relationship with their babies unless they are giving a bottle. And that couldn't be anything further from the truth. But by being involved in all other aspects of baby care, so maybe partners do the burping and or the calming or the soothing and the diaper change. They help keep the breastfeeding parent hydrated and nourished. Those are great ways that the partner can support the breastfeeding relationship and be a part of it. There's nothing wrong with partners giving a bottle or being involved in feeding, but sometimes we think that that's the only way that they can be involved.
Yes.
They can absolutely create that beautiful relationship by tending to all the other needs that infants have.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very important point, because we do tend to think, I've heard dads say like, but my partner is breastfeeding and I feel like I don't have that bond that I see other dads with the bottles and everything. But it goes way beyond feeding. We have so much connection opportunities with our babies. So I think those are other great ways to do it. Thank you so much, Taylor, for answering all of our questions today.
Thank you. This has been lovely.
We will be back because we have more to talk about together about matrescence, because we are both certified from Seasons of Matrescence certification. So we'll come back with breastfeeding and matrescence very soon. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
And I want to remember everyone that our meditation motivation for moms are on omama.ca, and that we will have one for breastfeeding mom very soon. Until next time. Thank you, Mama, for listening to this episode of Understanding Mother Stories podcast. You can find us on Instagram at omamaworld or on our website www.omama.ca.